And we're live.
All right. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Omer Qureshi Show live here on YouTube. It is Saturday, February 6th, 2021. We are live from various undisclosed locations from across the East Coast. I'm your freshly shaven host, Omer Qureshi, and as always, I'm joined by my super producer,
The
the
super
web,
producer without the fresh save.
without the fresh shave,
No fresh
Mr.
shave.
You don't want to touch my hand, Marcus Webster. Marcus, how you doing?
Well, I just was making a lot of chili and I got a lot of chili grease on my hands. What can I say?
All right. Well, welcome to Chili's. We got a wonderful show planned for you today. Marcus and I are going to be discussing the COVID-19 stimulus package, the latest one that was passed in the Senate. And we're also going to be talking about how targets among stimulus checks are going to work and how that could affect who gets a stimulus check, who doesn't. And we're also going to be comparing it to the one passed last year under Donald Trump. We're also going to be discussing Amazon. Big news out of Amazon. Amazon workers at a warehouse in Alabama are going to vote to unionize starting on Monday. We're going to talk about some factors that led up to this decision and why unionization overall is important. But housekeeping, we're going to begin today talking about the same thing I was talking about last week, which is Marjorie Taylor Greene, everyone's favorite racist congresswoman. Marjorie Taylor Greene this week was removed from her committee assignments. She was on the Budget and the Education Committee in the House, and the House voted to remove her for comments made. And the comments had to do with her comments about the white genocide, Jewish conspiracy theories, Islamophobia, QAnon, calling for the execution of some Democrats, really scumbag stuff. The vote happened. Resolution was passed with bipartisan support. 11 Republicans ended up coming over and voting to remove her from her committees, which was big, especially compared to the fact that 60 Republicans voted to remove Liz Cheney from Republican leadership. So that kind of tells you where a lot of the caucus is and where their priorities are, really. And I just want to touch very briefly on the significance of this. Marcus, as you know, committee assignments are a huge reason to actually elect someone to Congress in the first place. That's like the main way that you're able to get policy passed, to put your input on policies, because committees are where bills usually start. You can't, it's very difficult to get a bill, outside of committee to actually get it on the floor. It almost never happens, especially the way the rules are written now. So to have her taken off of her committee assignments essentially takes away almost all of her legislative power.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about people who have had this done to him in the past, it was someone like Justin Amash most recently had this done to him, or when he left the Republican Party, became an independent in 2019, he was actually removed from all of his committees and he had virtually no legislative power. He found a way to get stuff done with other members, and look for Marjorie Taylor Greene to do something like that, kind of use, Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, other people like that as surrogates for her possible legislation. But overall, it's a big deal because, especially for voters who understand the way Congress works, if someone is taken off their committee, it's very difficult for you to actually represent your constituents. It's difficult for them to have their voices heard in these important hearings. So if Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, is someone who I assume would want to, have, she was very for, I guess, Donald Trump's education policies, which were very, very historically inaccurate, to say the least. But she was essentially for that kind of stuff. And if she wants to question members, she wants to question people from the Department of Education about Biden and the way he's running things, she can't do that anymore. She can't do that on budget, which is a very important committee in Congress or the Senate. Marcus, what do you think? Do you think this is going to end up hurting her? Because I personally do, but do you think it'll end up hurting her in 2022 when she runs for re-election?
Well, I think that's a very good question, and I think it comes down to whether or not her constituents are despicable or not, right? If enough people realize, hey, the rest of the country doesn't want this type of person in elected office. If they realize, hey, if we're not going to have as strong of a voice and advocate for our community, if we want to be racist and if we want to say despicable things, and we want someone who's going to say you know, call for the deaths of Democrats, right? If they want that, they're going to have to trade off the power that they could have someone advocating for their community. Now, if they don't want that, they'll vote for literally anyone else who doesn't say those things. But that's the choice that they have to face. And now looking at Iowa with Rep. Steve King, who said some racist things, and he got stripped of all of his committees. He almost got expelled from the House. It was a very close. It was a very close situation. But
Mhm.
I think it's a little different from the past cases where the party took care of it themselves. And leading up to her losing her committees, it was a very interesting dynamic because the ethics committee wasn't set up. I think if the
Yeah.
ethics committee was set up, we'd have a very different conversation here. But Republicans really, it shows how radicalized Republicans have been, even compared to 2 years ago or 4 years ago. And, they're getting more and more radical because when Stephen
Mhm.
King said what he said, the Republicans came together and said, no, this cannot be a representative of our party. We're going to take all of the committees away from him. And he was pretty high ranking up in a lot of the committees. He was working his way towards chairman or
Yeah.
minority leader in these committees. But uh, they said no, we're going to stop this in its tracks. Now we got a freshman representative coming in who's spouting QAnon, not really apologizing for things when she's challenged. She just says, "I'm a mother, I have kids." I mean, that's great, but it doesn't really change what you said. You know, and the Republicans refused to actually take action. They've had a vote instead to see whether or not Liz Cheney is going to get removed from her leadership position because she voted for impeachment. That just shows you what the priorities of the Republican Party are at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember, on the same day that the Capitol insurrection happened, over a third of the caucus still voted to again certifying the results of the election. So that shows you where their priorities are. But I do want to say this though. I do think that, it is important that she did get removed from power like this. Obviously it would have been better if she was removed altogether and she wouldn't be able to run again. But, I think this is probably the next best thing. And for the Democrats, this is what you could do with their power right now, right? But what it does is it kind of contains the damage. And I compare it to Donald Trump. I have always said that it was important to get Donald Trump out of office because people like there's an argument that a lot of lefties make that oh well, he's done all the damage that he can do. There's not much more that can happen. It's not going to get any worse. So even if we have to eat another 4 years of Trump, it's fine. But that's dumb. It's not. It's that's dumb lefty stuff. Like it's like saying that was it's like completely tapping out from any representatives on the Democratic side like who are progressives and saying, "Oh, well, they don't actually represent us because they're Democrats." It's like the same kind of logic. It's false. It's not really like progressive. It's not really progressing any policy either, right? But with Trump, it was always like I always thought of it as if he had stayed in power another 4 years, it would have gotten way worse.
Oh yeah, he
Central
would
power
he
within
wouldn't
the
have to worry about a reelection. He could do literally anything
exactly.
he wanted to.
Exactly. Central power would have shifted over to the Republican Party, like within the Republican Party towards Trump even more. Like, as these guys, we've seen these people, senators are leaving. Who is going to get elected in their places, and especially in these Republican states? Probably Trump Republicans, because that's where a lot of the base of the party is, and that's where the party's shifting, and that's where they were shifting. And the more Trumpians you get into the party, and then the more and more they shape it, and that's how any party works. That's what progressives are trying to do with the Democratic Party. That's why we're electing people through groups like Justice Democrats and brand new Congress, right? Um, and I think more and more Trumpians would. More and more Trumpians would rule the party, there would be less pushback from the establishment because they wouldn't have that power because Trump at that point would have consolidated all the power in the party.
Yeah.
But right now you have a conversation, at least in some mainstream Republican circles, saying that okay, this shit is not right. What Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing is not right. You know, And it's not about, saving their party. It's not about anything. It's about stopping the descent into unwavering fascism. And that's been like always my fear with Trump, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize he doesn't really care about, the republic. He doesn't care about democratic institutions. He doesn't care about people. He just cares about himself. He cares about how popular he is, and he doesn't care about who he has to destroy on the way to getting there. And, they can always have their platform on TV. Marjorie Taylor Greene can always go on Newsmax and Fox News or whatever, but we can't allow this. We can allow them to platform on TV, but we cannot allow them a platform of power in Congress. So I think it was a good decision. Marjorie Taylor Greene, though, did have a response to everything that happened to her last week, and I believe we have a video of her press conference queued up. So let's take a listen.
I'm fine with being kicked off of my committees because it'd be a waste of my time. You know who I am. I'm a very hard worker, and I'm proud of it. So now I have a lot of free time on my hands, which means I can talk to a whole lot more people all over this country, and I can talk to more people and make connections and build a huge amount of support that I've already got started with people that want to put America first and don't care about the party lines and don't care about any of the political identities involved. And that's something that I am very excited about.
Are you sorry for David Hogg? What you said to him and about him?
David Hogg was an adult when I talked to him. I don't think any of you have realized that. David Hogg was working with the organization they were going around working hard for strict gun control laws. I'm very opposed to those policies. And so being in the same situation as David Hogg, my voice matters too. And so, no, I'm not sorry for telling him he shouldn't push for gun control. What we need to do is we need to protect our children. I think you're expecting we should protect our children and your baby as well with good guys with guns and not allow them to be sitting there sitting ducks. Yeah, thank you.
You talked earlier about the media teaching people to hate, but wasn't it you who liked a page on Facebook with comments saying Nancy Pelosi should get a bullet to the head?
You know, here's the thing. When you want to keep telling the same story over and over, but you don't want to tell the truth, that's your problem. And that's how we end press conferences.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, that's one way to end a press conference. That last bit was asked by a CNN reporter, and she obviously refused to answer that question because she assumes that CNN is fake news.
Well, no, that's how you end press conferences. Can we just point out how she's like a very disgusting mix of Trump and a conventional politician. Like, she does the whole thing like, it looks like you're expecting we need to protect your baby with more guns, and then she'll do the whole like Trumpy thing at the end where she's like, yeah, no, you're pointing out this one bad thing about me, but it's also true, but no, we can't keep talking about that because it hurts me. If you want to stay doing press conferences with me, you have to appease my ego, talk about the things that I want to talk about, because we don't want to talk about the issues. We don't want to talk about the things that are actually very vile and need to be addressed. No, at another point in the press conference, she says, hey, she's basically, why are we like still talking about this? Do you want me to apologize? This is what you did to Trump.
Right.
He would you would keep asking him to denounce things, but he never denounced things, and she never really apologizes for this too. She's like, I'm sorry for everything that I said that is false, is what she said. But like, what's actually false, right? So like, if she came out and said, on this date, I did this wrong. On this date, I did this wrong. I did this wrong. And she made a list and then brought that to the media, then they would say, hey, yeah, okay, what else do we have to judge? But the thing is, she makes blatant assertions. She's just like, no, I'm sorry for everything that's false. But then that means like, what do you think is false? That's why the media is asking these questions. And then she just obfuscates and says, oh no, everything that was false is false. But you could totally just believe that. If you don't think that's false, then she's not apologizing for it. So she's not losing any of the crazies. She's not convincing any of the people who support her. She's not pointing out, no, this QAnon thing is false, right? She's not saying that. She's just saying, I'm sorry for everything that I said that was wrong or bad.
Yeah, and she reminds me a lot of Matt Gaetz in that way, because Gaetz does all of this kind of, very sensational spectacle politics where he'll make a huge speech, but he'll articulate himself in a very kind of traditional Republican way, but he'll at the same time play to the Trumpian base, and he will, he won't go back on what he said. And that was a big part of Trump. It was deflecting the blame, saying that even though I'm wrong, and everyone's saying I'm wrong, no, you're wrong for saying I'm wrong. And you're wrong for this other reason that's completely unrelated. That's what she's doing in that press conference. And look, she's saying that, and she's also playing up that to that base. And people like her, people like Matt Gaetz, they're going to talk about this kind of thing where they say, send, partisan politics, all this kind of stuff, and I'm going to work for the people. And again, it's a very fascist message, what they're trying to deliver, because it's nationalistic. It's driven by it's not driven by the intention of doing good for the people. It's actually driven instead by the intention of doing good for a group of people, but mostly for themselves. And I talked about in a previous episode about like all the elements of Trumpism and how they completely align with fascism. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but you're seeing a lot of those undertones with her. And the second point I wanted to make, she mentioned David Hogg in the middle of that press conference. So for those who don't know, David Hogg was a survivor of the Parkland shooting. That was the one that happened in Florida in 2018, killed I believe 17 high school kids. And it was a big deal. It was the largest shooting in this largest school shooting in U.S. history. And David Hogg was obviously at that point. This was the same year, by the way, that this incident happened. Actually, let's play that. Let's play that. So Marjorie Taylor Greene actually confronted David Hogg after the Parkland shooting when he was testifying in Congress. So let's take a look at that.
David, why are you supporting the red flag laws? If Scott Peterson, the resource officer at Parkland, had done his job, then Nicholas Cruz wouldn't have killed anybody in your high school, or at least protected them. Why are you supporting red flag gun laws that attack our Second Amendment rights? And why are you using kids as a barrier? Do you not know how to defend your stance? Look, I'm an American citizen. I'm a gun owner. I have a concealed carry permit. I carry a gun for protection for myself, and you are using your lobby and the money behind it and the kids to try to take away my Second Amendment rights. You don't have anything to say for yourself? You can't defend your stance? How did you get over 30 appointments with senators? How'd you do that? How did you get major press coverage on this issue? And how did you get kids? Why do you use kids?
Oh my God. Okay, can we stop it, please? Like I can't listen to this stuff anymore. Look, okay. So obviously there she was harassing him on his way to the Congress to testify about gun laws and gun safety and why we need that. And look, we can take the entire debate about guns and gun policy completely out of this. Let's take it completely out and not even touch it, right? She said in the press conference that David Hogg wasn't a child. And that's true. David Hogg was 18.
Yep.
The only person in that video that we just saw who was a child was Marjorie Taylor Greene, because that's exactly what she was acting like.
Well, she was acting like Alex Jones.
Yeah, she was an immature brat harassing an 18-year-old kid who had this is the same year as the Parkland shooting, the same year, harassing him, saying the name of the dude who tried to basically kill him and kill people that he went to school with. She's doing all of this. And like, just think about how shitty of a person you have to be to go up to a mass shooting survivor and say this kind of stuff. Like,
well, I don't even think it's a mass shooting survivor. Just, this is a citizen, right? Now, there's a lot of people who go up to representatives, right, and they say, "Hey, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that?" Right? And I have a little less sympathy for that, but like, I mean, when you get in someone's face and they don't want to engage, and they're an 18-year-old citizen who's, you know, using his voice to do something that he think is right, right? Like, you don't harass someone, right? That was
Yeah.
harassment. And if he went to any police station in America, you know, he could go and file charges for harassment, probably get a restraining order. Because if you're following someone around for an entire city block, right? That's harassment. And it's just like it's a privilege to be able to do that. Because a lot of people in America, if they do that to someone, they're getting arrested, right? But she has
Yep.
this privilege where she can just go around and bother people, and it's just like, especially when it's, you know, she says, "Oh, why are you using kids?" Right?
Why are
He's
you?
18.
Because kids were the ones
He's
who were hurt.
18.
Kids
He
were
was
the
a
ones
kid
who
when
were
this
killed.
happened, and he's not using kids. These kids want to I don't want to say want to get used, but they want to be exposed. They want their story out there. They want to expose their story
Exactly.
to people. No, he's not using the kids. He's giving the kids a voice. And
He's giving them the platform to let people know that this is a problem for them. Okay. Again, whether or not you agree with gun laws, stricter gun laws or not, it doesn't matter. Okay. We can have that debate, and that debate happens constantly in the media and constantly in Congress. And look, for Republicans, nothing gets done anyway. So
Absolutely.
you don't really have much to complain about. But even the NRA is a very shitty organization. But even the NRA wouldn't stoop this low. And we have a lot of contempt on the left for the NRA and the way that they go about things very underhandedly under the table, right? But they wouldn't even do this kind of stuff.
because this is Alex Jones level shenanigans.
Right. And even Alex Jones of all people nowadays is saying that he was wrong to do any of that Sandy Hook stuff. It's not going to make
because
a
he got
difference.
sued.
The damage
He
already
got
done.
sued the heck
because
out
he
of.
got sued, right? But it's just like, but I'm saying like it's weird. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene just don't care though.
And then she's also like, how did you get 30 senators to, you know, agree to see you? Well, because he's acting like a reasonable person who has a policy grievance, right? He's gathered a media following, right? What have you done? You just spewed conspiracy theories. Of course they don't want to see you. You don't belong in Congress. She doesn't.
Largest mass shooting in the largest mass school shooting in the history of the country. That's how he got their attention.
And then I want to go back.
Not that hard to figure out.
I want to go back to the video because it actually stopped at
Okay.
a very interesting point. And I just want to, it's a still, and I just want to show it. But look at his face when she's just coming at him with this shenanigans, right? Like, look at his face. He's 18. He doesn't have a lick of facial hair, right? He's got the hair of a, like, you know, I'm not one for imagery. I'm all about the policy. But you don't look good when someone just wants to move from one building to another, and you're just constantly harassing, you're constantly bothering, you're pestering, and how is he supposed to answer all of those questions when you're just throwing questions at this 18-year-old, right? He's no politician. He's a citizen, just like you and me. And you're trying to take away his voice so that you can get like some kind of perverse like sense of like fulfilling justice. Like it's an injustice to say what you want to say. She's the one who's inhibiting. She wants to talk about the Second Amendment. Let's talk about the First Amendment, freedom of speech. He's practicing his, and you're trying to inhibit that through some kind of perverse intimidation.
It's wrong. And what's worse is, like, again, this was the same year as the Parkland shooting, and the kid probably had PTSD. Actually, he's come out and he said that he has PTSD about the incident. So, you know, to hear that kind of stuff bellowed at him, and for him to, you know, not react, you know, big props to him for just keeping it together and all that stuff, because what she did was reprehensible. And like, look, I obviously don't live in Georgia, but if I did live in her district, I would watch that video and again, take politics out of it. It's just scummy. It's just like, how do you live with yourself when you do shit like that? I don't know, but that's enough Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's enough of Marjorie Taylor Greene for one sitting. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the stimulus package, big stimmies coming out or not. If you make over $50,000 a year, we'll talk about that, targeted stimulus, and about the Amazon attempts within Amazon to unionize. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back. Omer Q Show. Be sure to like, share, subscribe.
And we're back.
And we're back. Welcome back to the Omer Q Show live here on YouTube. Remember to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. All right, next on the docket, we're going to be talking about stimulus. So this week was a big week for Biden. The impeachment trial starts on Monday, so they don't have a lot of time to actually get stuff done over the next month or two. Because the impeachment trial in the Senate is going to take up a lot of time. So the Senate passed the COVID-19 relief bill that Joe Biden proposed, which is the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill, which includes $1,400 for a stimulus check, which includes also extended unemployment of $400 a week through September, and a lot more money for state and local governments, et cetera, et cetera. One of the big developments, though, so it was passed with a 51 vote majority, and the Senate obviously used reconciliation for this process. But what happened was you had one piece of negotiating that was done throughout this, and that was with the Republicans, and that was about the targeted stimulus checks. So what that means is they were trying to limit the amount of stimulus checks that actually go out and try to limit it to people that they thought deserved it more. And what ended up happening was they had Democratic senators who came over and voted for an amendment that made it so that only people who made $50,000 or less would receive the full $1,400 amount. And then after that, it starts to fade out. And again, remember this, the tax bracket that they're working with, the taxes that they're working with to determine your income are from 2019. So if in 2019 you made $50,000, but in 2020 you were unemployed, there's a good chance you're not going to get that full $1,400 amount, which isn't even the full $2,000 that Joe Biden promised, but we'll save that for another episode. Now, the battle moves obviously to the House, and you've seen a lot of people, especially on the left, say that the targeting of these stimulus checks is wrong. Pramila Jayapal, who is a co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, has called it out and said that it's actually like disengages voters, it disengages people, and it makes people think that the government doesn't care about them, which people already were incentivized to think that way. And she brought up the important point. Like, there was a study out there that showed up that only 24% of those who lost work, and that's like including gig workers, including contractors, all those people, 24% of people who lost work received unemployment. Everyone else does not qualify for state unemployment. Therefore, they don't qualify for federal unemployment. So they're not getting that extra money. So they rely on these stimulus checks, these one-time checks, which they're not getting on a regular basis. That's why you're seeing a lot of people on the left argue for monthly checks. They're arguing for these monthly $1,000 to $2,000 number. That's like the number that they're going with. But and it just seems to me like poor strategy on part of the Democratic Party, because they've been saying for a long time the Democratic Party is the party for the working people. But to ignore something this big, to ignore something that this such a big logical fallacy that they're working this targeted stimulus around, it doesn't make sense to me. And Marcus, I'm really interested to get your opinion on this.
Well, I think there's smart ways to do targeting, but I don't think what they're doing is smart. 2020 was the year where things were affected. I think 2020 should be the year that even give the option. Say, hey, we want to target it so that you're under this income range, but you can file your taxes really quick for 2020, and then we can use that if you want. There's ways to target things where you don't leave out people who need the care, who need the help.
Right, but I mean, during an emergency, though, it does make sense to just kind of forget about that kind of extra stuff, to forget about, because it doesn't really matter, because or you're gonna try to make people file their taxes sooner, because the deadline for employers to give out 2020 taxes or 2020 W-2s just passed like a week ago. So people are just getting their stuff together right now. So to ask them to okay, file now and then like wait for like another month and then like maybe get their stimulus down the line after that. It just doesn't make sense. Just give the stimulus out to the people who need it, because odds are everyone does need a little extra
Well,
money
that,
during this time.
well,
It's just true.
I'd say there's been a K-shaped recovery where there's a lot of people who, by either fortune or happenstance, they are in the correct industries where they are making more money than they were
Okay.
before. I think that we should try to wheedle some of them out, so that we can focus our funds better, because we need to help a lot of the state governments, right? We gotta
Mm-hmm.
we gotta help out a lot of organizations, right? Like institutions. I'm not talking about like commercial institutions, but I'm talking about like the institutions that we need to survive, like and thrive, actually. Like universities, research facilities. We got to help out with the PPE. There's a lot of places that need money, and I don't think it's too horrible to say if you're doing good, you don't get extra money.
So what's the mechanism of doing that then?
I would say that there's ways to do that with 2020 income. Uh, you look at income, right, and you say, we're not going to judge it off 2019. We can just go off of 2019, right? That's a thing that you can do, right? But if you want more money, then we'll, send them the money that they deserve under 2019 first, right? But then have them apply for to get readjusted for 2020. I don't think that's too out of the question. Because if you're making more than 50,000 in 2019, odds are, you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be okay.
See, here's the thing. If the need wasn't so dire at this moment, especially for those people who are in that situation, I would see where you're coming from, right? And I still do see where you're coming from, but the way I'm seeing it is, look, the reality is that people owe on average $5,000 in back rent. People owe a lot of money for utilities that, in some cases is not getting, waived by their local PGE or whatever they have, right? They're not getting that wave. They're trying to also still use up the money that they have from the previous stimulus check and, kind of budget that out, working odd jobs, what have you. And, in a time of emergency, in a time where people are hurting and they need like direct relief now, and so they can budget out, just the next few months. Because remember, these aren't like, I've always disliked the name stimulus check. It works great for PR purposes for a lot of the establishment people who want to like push this out, but they're really survival checks. That's a better name for them, because that's what they are. They're survival checks where a lot of the people who get them, they have to budget around like the $600 they got, or the $1,200 they got before, or now the hopefully $1,400 they get. And I just think when you do this, when you make it more difficult for people who are already going through a very difficult time, who owe a lot of money, when stress levels are so high, when mental fatigue due to the pandemic is so high, I don't think that it's too much to ask from the government to say, okay, is it really important? Is it that important for us at this moment in time to like limit who gets a stimulus check and who doesn't, like make that the primary focus of what we're doing? I don't think we should prioritize that right now. Like
I think we should.
I don't think so. I just don't see the logic in it, Marcus, because at
Well,
the
the
end of the
survival.
day, go ahead.
Oh, well, for a survival check under 50,000 for 2019, I think that's a good point for survival checks, right? At that point, if you're making under 50,000, and you got to double it for the married folks. So if you're making under 100,000, right, it's pretty close. I think it's a little less than 100K for the married folks, where it starts tapping out. I think it's 85,000. Don't quote me on that. But
I think it's either 85 or like 90.
So like, we're talking about if you have that amount of money coming in on an average year before COVID, then you have the ability to help yourself more than someone at like a $30,000 level, or a married couple at 60,000. That's where the survival comes in. But if you're at the about $100,000 level and you're two people, you're probably gonna have a house. You're probably gonna have some equity in that house, or you have assets that can survive you through, right? And I don't think it is a survival check at that point. And
No,
we have
it is.
so many things, right? There's so many things going on right now that we need to focus our attention on, right? We have states that are in limbo right now. They're
So
taking in
then
debt.
why don't we it's not like, okay, we're spending 1.9 trillion dollars on this, and we are also in this bill as well, there is more money for what are essentially bailouts for not just small businesses, which I agree with, but there's going to be a lot of money that's going to end up going to corporations. Why not cut that money out? I
And we
feel like
should.
we should prioritize cutting that money out. If you, and here's the thing, we want to, we also, I hate this idea of limiting, you know, how much money we can give to people based off of how much money we can give to those, because to state and local governments for vaccines and what have you, because those two things, I don't see them going like together like that. They shouldn't affect each other. They should go together, but they shouldn't affect each other. You know what I'm saying?
I
I
don't think
just
we should rely on modern economic policies. You know, the idea that we can print money uh, at whatever rate without serious repercussions. I think it's destabilizing, and I just don't think we should pursue that as a policy. I think we can get away with it, but I think it moves the burden to future generations, and I think that across the board. I think we should stop. We should reduce military funding. We should reduce a lot of discretionary funding that doesn't make sense. And with the stimulus checks, I think that there are just too many people who are making a lot of money right now that we're not, you know, that we're not thinking about here. There's a lot of people who are doing okay during this crisis, right? And I'm one of
right,
them.
but
I don't think I should get a stimulus
Marcus,
check. I'm doing okay.
but Marcus, out of the I forget what the number is now. I believe it's still like around like somewhere between 10 and 15 million, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But but out of the people who are unemployed, you know, there's like a large number of them who, you know, we don't know how much they made last year. Could be 30,000, could be above 50,000, right? But of those people, I just don't. My thing is, I would rather not see those people like not get their checks and not get, you know, the money that they need. I would rather spend more now and, you know, hopefully have that stimulated in the economy with the people who already have the funds to take care of themselves than having see those people become destitute. That's the way I'm coming from this. But
And I think the
no,
way that the Biden administration and this what looks like now, I don't think it's smart targeting. And
yeah,
I would
because it's also
if it, if,
blanket targeting. It's also just blanket targeting,
yeah.
which like you said, there's ways of going about it. If you really want to target, then yeah, then like we can file our taxes earlier. There should have been like preparations for this already by the Democrats who were in
Well,
the House.
I
Right?
what's the date now? Said it's like Nancy Pelosi said this is going to happen March 15th is the deadline. So
Yeah.
I think that you know I hate to say it that this is going to be a slow process. I think we can speed it up. We can get some semblance of bipartisan support if we target, and I think targeting makes a lot more sense. There's a lot of people who don't need the
Well,
money, and we should try to weed them out as best we can.
well, I mean, the targeting was was a Republican led effort. Some Democrats came over, but the end vote in the Senate still ended up being 51-50. So I doubt you were actually going to see much bipartisan
Well, I
support
think we're going
for
to see a lot
this
more
kind
in
of
the
stuff.
House. The senators, they don't really care as much about the will of the people, uh, and I think
That's true.
a lot of the fear in the Senate from Republicans was giving the Democrats a blank check because they're going to use a budget reconciliation
But they're
vehicle.
going to use that anyway. They're going to
Yeah,
use that anyway. The
uh,
only reason they didn't get $15 minimum wage was because of your favorite senator, Joe Manchin.
well, absolutely, and I think what we're going to see is like if the House, I actually have a little bit more faith in the House than the Senate, and I think
Mhm.
if the House comes out with a good product, that you're going to see a few of those Republican senators flip because no one
Mark,
wants to say no to a good bill.
that's fair. That's fair. Except for Bill Clinton. A lot of people have told me no.
Well, that's
moving
rough.
moving on.
All right.
All right. I should not have made that joke. Woof. All right. Moving on. Let's talk about Amazon, Marcus.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So the super conglomerate corporation Amazon.
Also, dictate. I cannot say dictatorial. You know, you got that one for me? Dictatorial. Is that how you say it?
our almighty God, Jeff Bezos, has
Yeah.
been in the news this week. um, Jeff Bezos has been in the news this week, and for all of the wrong reasons. A lot of people made a big. Let me restart that. A lot of people made a big deal about Jeff Bezos stepping down from as CEO from Amazon, and that was a lot of the headlines you saw on CNBC and NBC and MSNBC and CNN and whatnot. But what you didn't hear that much about was the fact that Amazon workers are closer to unionizing than ever before. So workers at an Amazon warehouse in Alabama are preparing to begin to vote on the question of unionization. And, ballots are set to be mailed out on February 8th, which is this coming Monday, just a few days away. And eligible workers at the facility will be able to vote in mail over a period of about 2 months instead of an in-person event, which is how unions normally vote over the course of a few days. Now, this has been a long time coming. As we've seen during the pandemic, Amazon has not handled this pandemic and has violated a lot of ethical work conditions, and we've seen that Amazon has been very resistant in the past. They've hired Pinkerton men, they've hired private detectives to kind of weed out this type of behavior. In 2014 was the closest we ever came before to actual unionization in Amazon, and that was in the end destroyed by Amazon by putting pressure on the employees. And Amazon tried to also do very similar tactics here. Yesterday, Amazon launched its push to postpone the union vote when the National Labor Relations Board shot it down. The company asked the National Labor Relations Board to review the decision and pressed for in-person elections as a way to try to do this. And they cited flaws in the agency's definition of what constitutes a COVID outbreak, and why workers can't just come in and vote, and why they can't have an in-person vote. And obviously, they'd rather have an in-person vote because it's easier for managers, it's easier for supervisors to, oversee that kind of stuff and kind of nudge workers like, hey, this is not a good idea for the company. You might lose your job. And, they'll never outright say that, but that's always the pressure. It's pressuring people to vote in a way that they want under their rules. And that's why this mail-in vote process is so important. And also, I just want to point out how hypocritical it is for a company like Amazon, like and the hypocrisy of any company, Walmart included. You can say this by anyone. During the election, how many commercials, how many ads did you see of companies saying, "Oh my God, go out and vote, go vote by mail,
Yep.
do whatever you have to go vote." But they are trying to restrict in person, or they're trying to restrict voting to in person during a pandemic of their own workers. So that just it just screams hypocrisy for me. There was a lot more that went into this, but
Absolutely.
Marcus, just initial thoughts about Amazon unionizing and these workers and what this could mean moving forward.
Well, I think it was a very discouraging sign to see Jeff Bezos resign, or well, yeah, resign and move to a different role. Uh, a lot of the good that has come out of Amazon has been by personally targeting Jeff Bezos. A couple years back, Bernie Sanders used one of these that chain of attack. Right, it said, "Hey, Jeff." He pointed to him personally because he's a huge figure. He's the founder. He's the person who, if you think of Amazon and you're thinking of a person, you're thinking of Jeff Bezos.
Yep.
Bernie Sanders said, "Hey, Jeff, you need to pay your workers a living wage." And what did Jeff say? He said, "Yes." When we lose that figurehead to personify Amazon, to personify the gains of Amazon, such as the billions and trillions of dollars he's making, right? When you lose that person, you lose a lot of the sway that you have. When you lose a lot of that momentum, and now I think Amazon will be emboldened because Jeff Bezos is in the back seat. Jeff can say, "Well, it's not me anymore. It's this other guy who really no one really knows much about. All we know is he's an AI guy. He's been working the web services side of Amazon." But I think that's a huge bargaining chip to have someone. It's not the figurehead of the company anymore. It's just a random CEO. I think that's going to hurt Amazon and the unionization efforts a lot.
Right. And Amazon as a company, like people don't realize this, in the past year, it's grown immensely. Like they had record quarterly numbers every single quarter. I remember reading like in their third quarter they had like $6 billion of revenue, like net revenue, which is insane. Bezos, he became a whole hell of a lot richer. Became He and Elon have been fighting for the past like 6 months about who's the richest person in the world, which is like that's like the most OP thing to ever fight about. But but the big thing is all of this. We saw all of this wealth, all of this success for Amazon as a company, and for the presidents and vice presidents and all the chairs on the board of directors. But what we didn't see was the same return for the workers. Instead, workers actually had their hazard pay cut back in May,
Yeah.
and workers stopped receiving hazard pay in May. And like if it wasn't for local government ordinances in some local governments, which forced Amazon's hand to actually pay some workers, we wouldn't have any workers receiving hazard pay right now. So
Well, then it's very fascinating to see the whole dynamics here, because we're basically at a crossroads where Washington's getting angry at these big corporations, and there's visible anger. Even the senators, I forget his name. I was actually listening on the way somewhere in my car. I had C-SPAN on because obviously that's what you put on your radio in DC.
Always.
But during it was the nomination for the Secretary of Labor. It was the hearing for that. Even the senator from Alabama had to address it, and he addressed it in a way that it seemed like it was pretty favorable towards the unionization.
Yeah.
And obviously a Republican. So it's something that's getting bipartisan support against these corporations. I think that's a good sign. Especially because they're being bold. They're very bold. They're putting tracking devices in cars and vans and trucks. They're surveilling their employees like some kind of Chinese nation, like the Chinese state, and surveys their citizens. And I think this is going to be the crossroads where policymakers decide: do we want to take Amazon's campaign contributions and get lit up on that for every primary and every election that we run? Or do we want to actually stand up to these companies, break up the monopolies, and figure out how do we move forward? That's because also this is a huge strain on small businesses. Is the fact that Amazon is able to have such a monopoly power. And small businesses are actually being forced to use Amazon, or it's either you adapt and use Amazon, or you get wiped out because you can't have in-person sales as much as you used to. No one wants to do that. It's not even.
And like you said, just look at where this is happening. This isn't happening in like New York, like the Bronx, right? Where you're probably expecting a lot of working class support, like the Hunts Point strike that we talked about. Wasn't a lot of surprise because New York is a very strong union town. But Alabama, is Republican country. It's Trump country, right? But that's the thing. When companies affect people like at home, when they affect you, like workers, no matter what, they're going to come back to one thing and say, okay, the corporation's treating me unfairly, I'm going to rally against that. And I think the big example was, I don't know if you heard about this, the Staten Island Amazon thing that happened, I think in March, right? So there's a supervisor who actually outed this, and he blew the whistle on what was going on. In March, people were getting sick, people were coughing. He was told by the company that someone had tested positive for COVID-19 2 weeks prior, and told not to tell people. Managers also knew that if they stepped out of line, like they would get fired, because that's what ended up happening to the supervisor. And that's kind of how these companies keep a grip over you. Corporate management was slow. They refused to take action. And to this day, they're still slow and refuse to take action. They wanted to try to pressure people into voting against unionization through like having in-person ballots. So, this all comes to the bigger thing, right? This is the biggest critique that people on the left have against what we call unfettered capitalism is that it does nothing to curb greed, and it doesn't incentivize against exploitation. And that's what a lot of these companies do.
Well, here's the thing. Everyone, even socialists, love capitalism. when you think about
Yeah.
it, right? Everyone loves capitalism when everyone has a fair shot to make the money. But what we have is what we have what was supposed to be a social democracy, right? A socialist democracy, democratic socialist. That's what we were supposed to have. That's the ideal, right? But what happens is we have a capitalistic oligarchy where people,
Mm-hmm.
if you have power, you can make as much money as you want. But if you don't have the power, you don't have the money up front, then you have
Right.
very few opportunities, and you have to you're incentivized to hurt other people to make money, right? I'm all about having a system that's a truly mixed economy where if you have your basics, you have your health care, you have a good education, you know, you have the basics that you need. You have enough food, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
all of that, right? Everyone has that level starting point, right? If you think of it at the game of life, no one gets the bad cards. Oh, you broke your leg, you're in bankruptcy now. No, you don't
Right.
have those cards. Let's take those cards away, right? And then let's compete. And at that point, we can say, well, who's going to make the most money now? Then we can have the Elon Musk versus Jeff Bezos. Who's going to have the most money now in this system where everyone had a fair shot to do that?
Right. But then right now we don't have that,
We
obviously.
don't.
Instead, we got a system that, it allows Amazon to pay nothing in taxes, and get like over $130 million rebate on it, and then also exploit their workers. And, let's talk about what this is really about. For the workers, it's about getting some sort of leverage on the company, because at the end of the day, this is a company that workers help build. Jeff Bezos did not do this by himself. It might have been his vision, but it was also just the people who were just as much instrumental in this are the people who carried out his vision. And for him and for the company to do what they did, to treat people the way they did, to not tell people that people were testing positive for COVID-19, to take away hazard pay, to have people come in who were sick, to fire workers for no other reason but protecting their fellow employees. This is like the very basic argument anyone can make for unionization. Like, this is like, it's like it gives them leverage, it gives them stake in the company that they helped build. And it protects them from getting exploited, protects them from people taking away their hazard pay. Instead, you would have a union that says, okay, we have it in writing that during a pandemic, you are going to give us, X amount in hazard pay no matter what until the pandemic is over. We can't rely on these companies to do it by themselves, because Amazon's a biggest example. They're not going to do it. Walmart's the same thing. They're not going to do it. All these other conglomerates, all these other companies, they're not going to do it because they're not incentivized to. It's not best for their bottom line. They don't need to. That's the point. That's why we need unions to step in, and that's why we also need support from political leaders to support these unions. Like, it's not going to happen without some sort of backing. Like, AOC going up to Hunt's Point wasn't what, it wasn't the initial push, but it was what got it over the edge and made it easier for those workers to get what they needed, because politicians have leverage and politicians bring a lot of focus to these issues.
Yep.
And if you have a large amount of, bipartisan support for an Amazon union, then Amazon at the end of the day is going to have to cave in. But it's also up to the politicians not to cave into Amazon's money. And that's where we've seen this battle between, but we're seeing this battle between the corporate world of campaign finance and, just basic activism and public service.
And I think the way that we win that battle is we got to draw in the people who have this illusion, right? They have this illusion that, hey, one day I'll be a billionaire, so I don't want these policies that are going to help people put in place. I don't want that. They want the ability to screw people over later just in case they become rich. And I think that's something we seriously need to sit down, and we have to have a moral code in this country, right? You go to China, right? They have a moral code that's been enshrined for thousands of years, right? You go to for better or worse. It's actually, I'd say, for the worse there. But they have a code. You go over to Europe, right? These countries have, we take care of our own. They have that ingrained in their country, right? But in the United States, for a few hundred years now, I'd say it's gotten a lot worse since the 80s, since the Reagan era. But
Mm-hmm.
we've started this whole thing of, no, we're out here to screw over people for own personal good. The most important thing in America is getting rich for yourself, and it doesn't matter who you hurt. And I think that Jeff Bezos and people like him perpetuate that. They go to these politicians, they say we need policies to become even richer. They don't do anything good with that money. They'll give a few thousand here to that charity, a few thousand there to that charity, but it doesn't matter. What
Yeah.
they do is they gather wealth for their own good, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for it if the government actually would stand up and say, "Hey, we are the richest nation in the world, but our healthcare is what is it? Is it 37 this year? Probably with COVID, it's probably even worse.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's worse
yeah, it's worse. We make the most money in the world. We're spending the most money on healthcare
per capita.
per capita. And what we're doing is we're getting results in the 30s, probably the 40s this year with the COVID response, and that needs to stop. We need to get everyone who is on the middle, the lower, even the upper levels of the economic ladder to realize we could all do so much better if we put our resources together, if we sat down as a country and said, hey, are we going to are we going to just worship money? Are we going to worship you know this idea of being rich, or are we going to be richer as a country altogether by making sure that the basic needs of everyone are fulfilled? I think that's what we
Right.
got to do.
Right. And a lot of what you're talking about is kind of redefining the American social contract. Because right now, and for the longest time, like you said, the American social contract has been one of kind of leave me alone, let me do whatever wrong thing I'm doing, let whoever's the most powerful prevail, and let them do whatever wrong thing they're
Yeah.
doing and don't interfere. And it hasn't worked. For the majority of people, it has failed. The
Mm-hmm.
American economic system has failed most people. The American healthcare system, like you said, has failed most people. The American government, as we just covered, is
Education.
failing everybody. Education is failing people. And for us to say this idea of American exceptionalism, we the Republicans like to tout, and even Democrats like to tout the idea of American exceptionalism, like we're the best at everything, and no matter what, we're gonna be the best because we're America, and that's it. We need to expand our our view of it just a little bit. We're allowed to be self-critical. Maybe the social contract that we have interpreted, either we've interpreted it wrong, or maybe it needs to be redefined to work for more people. Because right now, in the middle of a pandemic, the entire healthcare infrastructure in this country was revealed to be flawed, exceedingly flawed. It almost crumbled because of a pandemic. It barely could have survived beforehand. And now we're seeing record numbers of unemployment. We're seeing a record number of people getting kicked off their healthcare. 14 million people during the pandemic got kicked off their healthcare. That's the best healthcare system in the world? Is that the
It's
defense
not.
that these people want to give? No, it's obviously not. And in order to rewrite the social contract, we need that kind of unifying message around it. And I hate it, and then Trump actually in a way was successful with it, even though his intention was completely wrong and his social contract was completely different, right? He was using a working class message, a populist message, to get that passed, and
And
he
it's why
lied,
he
right?
won. It's why he won.
But his lies, but even all of his lies were wrapped up with enough truth that it was palatable to some people.
Well, it's why he
And
won the first time was because he told the lie, and the why the second time in 2020 he lost because he didn't deliver on his lies.
didn't deliver, right?
They
and
they were
and i
revealed his
think
lies.
and I think in order for us to move past this, we need to get working class centric message across nationally. And Bernie did a good job, I think, at laying the groundwork for it. And
Yeah.
the way he led his campaign actually is exactly how I would lead it, as far as his theme goes, because it wasn't just, oh well, we're gonna cater to this one marginalized group, or we're gonna cater. No, no, no. We're gonna cater. He instead of looking at politics left and right, it was up and down the entire time. It was you are hurting. You are hurting in your pocketbook. You're hurting in your mental health because you're stressed about all this debt you're in, probably. And I'm going to try to do my best to change the country to alleviate that and make this a better place, not just for you, but your kids, but your grandkids, and make society as a whole flourish.
Yeah.
And, it's not going to happen overnight. As we saw, like the Bernie 2020 campaign was probably the closest we ever got to rewriting that social contract. And it was way off the mark as far as where we need to be and winning. So there's a lot of work to be done. But at the same time, I think that, for any progressive or any Democrat, if your entire thing is, if the entire thing you're gonna run on is like just one thing, if you're just gonna run on like one key thing, like, if you want to run on like ending police brutality, if you want to run on, or if you want to run on like just healthcare, and that's your main thing, it's it's not gonna rewrite the contract in the way we need. It's not going to change the country in the way we need. I think it's time for us to start looking at politics up and down and start to ignore a little bit left and right. Obviously you're not going to ignore like QAnon stuff like that crap you can't ignore, right? But like on a basic level, we do need to start looking at things like who's hurting the most in this country. It's disproportionately working class people,
Yeah.
people who are making less money, are like who are making starvation wages. Like those are the people we need to focus on, and that's how you make this country flourish. Because like Reagan liked to talk about trickle down economics. It failed, and it failed when Reagan did it. It failed when Bush. It failed when Bush tried to do it. It failed when other Bush tried to do it, and it's failing now. Under Trump it failed. So trickle down economics doesn't work. We need to start thinking about things maybe in a little bit of a trickle up phase, because if the people at the bottom of your society are doing well enough that they don't have the worries that they're going to be destitute if they go to the hospital, they don't have the worries that they're that they're not going to have to be able to put food on the table for their families, I think anything above that, like, you're gonna be fine.
Yep.
All right. And even if, and like we'll get into taxes and that kind of stuff later, but it's like a basic, it's a basic thing of like, our entire country's philosophy and where we want it to go and who we want to help. And right now, the American philosophy, the American social contract, whatever you want to call it, it's not really helping the majority of people.
Absolutely.
Marcus, any final thoughts on that?
I think we summed it up.
All right, cool. Let's take a quick short break.
Absolutely.
And when we come back, we'll have some fun. We'll have some fun parting words.
Let's do it. And we're back.
We are back. All right, we're gonna close the show by talking about Tim Pool, everyone's favorite baby Jimmy Dore. So baby Jimmy Dore, Tim Pool, was on his show, the Timcast, and he was talking about AOC. And for those who don't know, AOC earlier this week was talking about, or she revealed her perspective on the Capitol insurrection and the traumatic experiences she went through. And what you need to know going into watching this clip is basically AOC had a run-in with a police officer who was very panicked himself, and it led to a situation where she felt in danger. And then obviously, there were people breaking into the Capitol. Nobody knew what was going on at the time, so it was a very surreal experience being there, especially knowing AOC is one of the targets of these people, and online chatter suggests that she was one of the main targets because she's a very prominent figure in not just Democratic politics, but politics in general. But this is Tim Pool's take on AOC talking about her experience at the Capitol. So let's take a listen.
Cortez said, I do not fault AOC for being scared. And a lot of people are trying to drag her, saying, targeting her for emotional reasons, whatever. No, I don't care. Look, AOC clearly does not have the, what's the right word? I'm trying not to be disrespectful, but let's just be honest. She doesn't have the strength or fortitude of will to properly handle a situation like this. That is not meant to be disrespectful to her. I don't expect her to be a war veteran who's experienced crisis.
Marcus, how would you handle a situation where thousands of insurrectionists who probably wanted to kill you are storming the place you work?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's something you have to be in the situation to actually figure out.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna speculate on what I'd do. Because I would do very angry things.
Would you? Well, we love to hear that. Would you fault someone who potentially was a bit concerned for their safety?
No. You should absolutely. There was a lot of reason for her to be concerned, and I don't think you should be insulting someone, even if you're trying not to insult. So I gotta think of a way to say this.
Oh yeah. I love this. It's like it's like when people say no offense, like dude.
It's like that one song where it's like, I'm trying to find the words to describe this girl without being disrespectful, and then they just say all of the disrespectful things. It's like you did not try that hard.
Right. Okay. Let's continue watching the clip and let's talk about it.
And I don't expect her to be someone who's hardened from our inner city streets. AOC lived, I guess she was like upstate New York in the Bronx.
Oh
not the worst places in the world.
Okay.
I'm sure she has a general understanding of some kind of,
For anyone who's ever either lived in New York or been to New York.
Yeah, I guess she's from the Bronx, like
upstate. The Bronx is not upstate New York. That is New York.
Well, I think what he was saying was like she's from upstate and also from the Bronx. In like to give him the benefit of the doubt. Because she did spend a brief amount of time in upstate.
Listen to what he said. He said she said from the Bronx, he said from the Bronx, which is upstate New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. Like a little geography lesson, Timmy boy. Continue.
Street life can be like or whatever, but she's absolutely soft. Again, I'm not saying this to be mean, okay? Come on, like we're not gonna sit here and pretend that AOC is a combat veteran or who has hostile environment training. So when she hears a bang on the door, she gets terrified. I can respect that. Not everybody is a soldier.
Apparently not.
And that's why we have warriors, and that's why we respect soldiers, because they're the ones who have the strength of will and the confidence. It's not even about look. So I'll tell you this: firefighters, cops, soldiers, combat or otherwise, medics, they get scared too. But the difference between being a coward and being brave is not whether or not you're scared; it's whether or not you overcome the fear. AOC was able to get out of the situation, and she was terrified of these police officers. Now, I will be critical in some respect. I think that we need to have, there's a reason I'm a fan of Tulsi Gabbard. She is a major in the National Guard. Plus, she's been just doing really, really awesome stuff in the past, a couple of weeks, past month. She called out John Brennan and Adam Schiff as domestic enemies, and I'm just like, keep talking. I like it. But she's a major in the National Guard. I don't think she would be freaking out the situation. I don't want leaders in this country who are soft, wads of cookie dough. Okay? I want people who are carved from stone. Now, I recognize sometimes politicians are politicians.
Okay.
Oh
okay.
my gosh, there's so much. There's so much.
Please, Marcus.
There's so much.
I do want to get your reaction to Timmy Boy's wonderful take. There.
It's victim blaming. It's 100% victim blaming. And like, there's sometimes people say it's victim blaming where it's not victim blaming, but there's an angry mob, right? They're committing crimes, and she was the target of that angry mob. And you're just gonna say, you can't be soft. I need you to come in on a chariot with a horse and a sword and repel the mobs from the Capitol. That's the kind of leader I want. And then can we also talk about how in his scenario, right, he's gonna like bring up another woman and compare two women, right? Like, what? Why? What is that? Does that make it less like? Are you trying to like defend yourself from being called sexist or something? Like, oh, I'm gonna. I like some women. I only hard women. Women need to be hard and warriors. I'm like, what? What are you talking about?
It's so. I mean, no. He and Jimmy Dore just have this weird obsession with Tulsi Gabbard, and then they want to prop her up as like the real American, the real person who
also,
represents America.
Can we admit that's politics. A little weird? Like the way that he was talking about Tulsi, like she's the one true champion of America. She's not a soft woman. She's a hard woman. She's in the National Guard. She's a major. Oh my goodness. She's the leader that I want for this country. I'm like, what are you on, dude? Holy
if only
smokes.
her political values were as steadfast as her courage would be allegedly in that situation. Which I'm not saying it wouldn't be. But look, it's just like, and the critique that he later gave, and I didn't show that in that clip because I did not want to listen to Tim Pool any longer than I had to.
That's fair.
But the critique that he gave too was that, her office, the office that she was in was actually down the street from the actual Capitol. Now, anyone who's been in the Capitol, anyone who's lived in DC or knows about it, right? Yeah, the offices of the lawmakers are in the surrounding buildings, in the surrounding area, and it's down the street, right? But it's ignoring two facts. When people criticize, it's ignoring two facts. One, all those buildings are connected together. So, if a person breaks into the Capitol, they can come in and go through the garage and go to the Cannon office building.
Yeah.
And the other bigger thing that they're ignoring is in the moment, when you hear that people have broken into the Capitol, odds, if I'm working in a congressional office, yes, I'm gonna be concerned about the reality that people might have also break into my building because they know that lawmakers work there. And if there's any lawmaker, they might have researched it's AOC. So in the moment, to be fearful, it's not cowardness. It's probably the smart thing to do if you're AOC.
And she's not one of those Republicans walking around with a gun for no reason, right?
No.
And she's clearly, and if the officer is showing like a bit of emotion himself, like, or or herself, I don't know who the officer was in this case, but if the officer who ran into AOC is showing emotion of fear, then it's reasonable to also be fearful, and who knows what you don't know. He doesn't know what response he would have. I bet from the way the cowardness he's showing, he's probably, I don't think he'd probably be whimpering under a chair or something. Who knows? He's never been in that situation, to my knowledge. So why is he judging someone who has?
Right, and it's like also ignoring the fact like pipe bombs were found in the surrounding area, like near the building. That like there was a mob. It was a mob who was attacking the Capitol. They got into other office buildings. They to think in the moment that they might come into mine. I don't think that's a reach. I don't think that's being a coward. I don't think that's being overreacting at all. I think that's the exact right emotion I would want.
What? And
to
5
have in
people
that.
died. 5 people died, right?
6 people.
6. Yeah.
6 people now. An
So-
officer took his life.
Yeah. So if people are dying, right, in your workplace, you have the right to be fearful, and to say that she's not a leader because she didn't charge in with us. Like, what was she supposed to do in the scenario? Was she supposed to stand on the floor of the house and wait to be taken? Is that true leadership? I think true leadership is everyone, to an extent, everyone wants to be the one who saves the Capitol, right? Everyone who wants to continue working, everyone wants to be brave, right? But at a certain point, it doesn't make sense. And if you evacuate the Senate floor, you evacuate the House floor, are all of them cowards? Should they just stood there and waited to be taken captive by a zip tie guy? No, they did the right thing by relocating themselves in an expeditious manner to be safe. Because nothing gets accomplished if a member of Congress is held kidnapped. Do you know how much more stressful this situation would have been? You know how much more dangerous this situation would have been if someone got kidnapped? That would have been the end game.
It's also like it's a very similar, or it's not like exactly similar, I should say, but you can say like the trauma that she felt in that moment, and people invalidating her trauma, like people have trauma for different reasons, and there's different levels of things that trigger people, right? And like something like that, I could see that as being traumatizing. And much like the Parkland survivor that we were talking about earlier, like for Marjorie Taylor Greene to essentially invalidate his trauma and ignore it and say that, oh, well, your trauma doesn't matter as much as my opinion and what I believe. Like, I'm just gonna ignore it, and I'm going to do what I want to do. That's exactly what Tim Pool is doing in a very similar way. He's invalidating her rightful trauma that she should feel, because I know that if people broke into what is supposed to be one of the most secure places in the entire country, and a mob broke in and they were chanting "Hang Mike Pence," they were chanting "Hang Nancy Pelosi," they were there's not video of obviously people chanting "Hang AOC," but the chat room suggests that she was a potential target of this mob.
Well, she's gotten death threats before.
Yes, obviously she's gotten death threats before, and she even talked about that. She's got death threats leading up to this, so it wasn't like oh, this just happened. Yeah. And she had no context. The context is she was getting death threats way before the election even happened. In general, AOC receives a shit ton of death threats. Absolutely. Because of where she is in politics, and that's the thing that happens, right? And unfortunately, it happens. But to see it on this scale, and to see people just saying that, oh well, you should have been Tulsi Gabbard in this situation. It's just dumb.
Well, Tulsi Gabbard evacuated too, didn't she?
Tulsi Gabbard. She's not in. She's not a member of Congress anymore. She didn't run for re-election.
Oh shoot, yeah. That was her year. But
she always has enough time to go on the Jimmy Dore show and the Timcast. So
that's something Jim Webb always wants. Jim Webb wants more time.
More time. Yeah. But speaking of time, we are about to run out of time. But we're coming to the end of the show. Marcus, any parting words from the wonderful discussions we've had today?
Well, just closing out this one, I'd say if you're in a mass shooting situation, if you're in a situation where your life is in danger, you're not a coward when you walk away. Even in the military, what they train is, first thing you're supposed to do is run if you can, if it's feasible and safe. The second thing you're supposed to do is hide, right? You're supposed to find cover, concealment, and find a place where you can barricade yourself in and be safe. You know what the third thing you're supposed to do? The third thing you're supposed to do is attack. That's the third thing, right? Those are lawful instructions given by the top military brass for what you do in a situation where you're in a mass shooting or terrorism situation. You're supposed to run, hide, and act. So if you're in one of those situations, don't listen to fools like Tim Pool who tell you, oh no, you're supposed to be brave and come in on a stallion with a shining armor and a sword to vanquish the Trump supporters. No, that's not what you're supposed to do. And no credible human with any type of moral like convictions is going to tell you to unarmedly just attack random people because your building's under attack. No, do
Attack thousands, a group of thousands of people.
the generals and the admirals of the military, the top brass, the Secretary of Defense mandatorily tells soldiers like Tim Pool was saying, that you're supposed to run, hide, and act. So no, if you've been in one of these situations, I think that it's very important that you know that you are supposed to hide, you are supposed to run, and the last resort is to attack. I think that's something very important to put out there, because there's people who have been in these situations and they shouldn't feel bad for doing what they did.
Exactly. I agree with you. And, I hope that Timmy Boy will learn his lesson, but I highly doubt it. But like I said, much like Jim Webb in 2016, we are out of time. We'll try to do better the next time. For Marcus, I've gotten through an entire show without mentioning the webcam. Can we get a shot of the webcam? Just
Absolutely.
Just for old time's sake. There we go. There's a webcam. We love the webcam here. We also love you, the viewers. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever new videos release. Also, check out our website, oqpolitics.com, for new daily blogs, articles, videos, and much more. oqpolitics.com. I'm Omer Qureshi for Marcus Webster, signing off. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place.